This video is a recording of a live event, about an hour and 15-minute webinar. And it's really packed with all sorts of energy healings and information and explorations into the fine abstract layers of creation. I hope you love it. If you do, please like and subscribe. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go over what is energy healing, brief description. Then we're going to go into 3 minutes of silence, where we kind of stabilize and integrate the power of our healing collective. And then we're going to do a prayer of gratitude. And then we're going to, thank you, do a brief review of what we covered yesterday, very brief, and then we'll dive into today's session. And today's session is going to be mostly questions and answers. I think I'll be bringing out the points in the context of your questions because so many incredible questions came in. And I don't want to miss anybody's question. And if, as I'm going along, if you have more, just pop it into the question and answer box and it will pop up over here. And I will be happy to address it. Thank you. Thanks everyone for being with me. All right. Energy healing is using attention, which is our piece. It's our possession. We possess attention, and attention is being, it's consciousness, it's awareness, it's pure perception, pure awareness that we direct intentionally. And wherever we direct it, it brings the values and qualities of the source of creation with it because it's made of pure source material. So it goes there and you feel it. We feel it. We feel whatever we're looking at. You know, there's my speaker right there. But attention has a transformative effect wherever it falls. That's the important thing about energy healing. So very spontaneous, it's very innocent, spontaneous process. And this is why we have pain, right? Because the body cries, oh, it hurts over here. And so then your attention goes over there and the flow of attention to that area creates some transformation in that area. It starts to soften and soothe. And sometimes if there's a lot of pain, you can use your hand chakra because the attention can flow. We're used to flowing attention through our hands because we use our hands to make stuff and do stuff and manipulate our world. And that flow of the awareness through the palm of the hand will bring the attention even more formidably, even more completely into the area that hurts. And it definitely, it's a great way to reduce pain. It's definitely a technique for that. As well as actually bringing the clarity and precision, discrimination that helps to define where's the seed or the source of the imbalance, and then getting attention right in on the seed of it. And usually the seed is hidden. This is why energy healing is a thing. This is why it's not like, oh, well, just like everybody constantly does that all the time, right? Because we're already constantly focusing our attention. Yes, but there's a little bit of an art to it in that if we go to the seed or the source of the symptom's at the surface, but the seed is deep down inside, then it's the effect, the healing effect is more complete and more powerful, it's faster, because when the awareness goes right into the seed and addresses that and heals the imbalance from its seed point, then the symptom goes away very quickly. Otherwise, it's a long, slow process. And sometimes if you're in a long, slow healing process, it's because there are details that your soul needs, that you want to know. You want to get in and like pull it apart and understand every fine detail. If we go very, very quickly, go to the seed, take out the seed, boom, the symptom's gone. And then the soul is like, oh, well, there was something else I was trying to learn there. And so what will sometimes happen, can happen, is that then another effect crops up. But if we've addressed the seed, the next effect that crops up will be from whatever's left of that seed, whatever piece is left over, and it won't be as severe. So it still is a great value to go in and address the seed of concern and eliminate it completely from its root, and then move on. All right, that's energy healing, essentially. And a lot of what we do in these sessions is we explore those finer, more abstract regions, hence the background, the finer, more abstract regions of creation, where the seeds tend to sit, where they lie. And of course, this session, today's session, which is addressing darkness and turning darkness to light, is about boldly going into the darkest regions of the subtle fields of creation and getting to those imbalances or incompletions directly and with the resources, all the resources that we need to help bring wholeness back. So that's what we're doing. Okay. Why do we start with 3 minutes of silence? Because, as I mentioned before, the source of creation is the foundation for all energy healing. Awareness is source material, right? So what we do is we go to the seed of awareness. We go to the seed of energy healing, which is the source of creation. Oh, look, it's the seed of everything. So of course it's the seed of energy healing. But it's really nice when we're doing these live webinars that we're doing the work together as a big healing, big, powerful healing collective. And so it's really nice to start out with that moment of connection and anchoring our awareness into the source of creation so that everybody feels real solid with that particular fundamental of energy healing. All right, so I'm going to ask you to close your eyes and we'll just be quiet for just a few minutes, about 3 minutes. And then when we open the eyes, take a minute, don't come out too fast because the nervous system is integrating the silence. All right, let's close our eyes. All right, let's slowly open our eyes. Take a minute. I was trying to go to 3 minutes and it just like, it just wanted to come out at 8 minutes after 1 o'clock. So that's just what happens. Thank you. Thank you to the source of creation for being everything. Thank you for being our dear ancestors whose efforts gave rise to this lifetime that we're living right now. Thank you to the eternal tradition of wisdom whose efforts have founded, whose efforts have founded our ability to do energy healing at all, and all the spiritual development that takes place, all the connection between the unmanifest and the manifest. Thank you to everyone here for your efforts as we work together concisely and efficiently. We go to the seed of the imbalances, in this case, the darknesses that grip our world. May our webinar today meet and exceed everyone's hopes and wishes for what we can accomplish. Thank you to each one of you who are watching now and each one who will watch in the future. Everyone watching, everyone who watches. Thank you to everyone for this rare and precious opportunity to be the voice of our healing collective. I am so grateful, and I feel so humble in the presence of each one of you, because when I read your questions, it's like, oh, such profound being. You're so amazing. Thank you. Okay. So I see more questions coming in over here. And I thought we would go ahead and first we'll do a review of yesterday, and then we'll go into today. Yesterday, we talked about the laws of nature, how the laws of nature differ from the surface to the depths of being, and that at the surface, the laws of nature are more oriented towards diversity, and at the depths of being, the laws of nature are more oriented toward unity. And that's why at the subtler levels of creation, we get more symmetrical forms, which are more stable, but also they're forms that are experienced or shared collectively as well. And then the resolutions are formed through the interaction with the surface. So our inconsistent, our incomplete, our highly defined, I shouldn't say incomplete necessarily, but our highly defined and diverse expressions at the surface actually glorify and allow the wholeness to be understood as exquisitely beautiful, exquisitely beautiful. So all beings, all forms of creation are rising or accelerating toward completion. And at the surface, we're constantly like, this is what we do, like our very existence provides the context for completion, for wholeness to understand its complete form. That's the nature of human existence and everything else existence. Like I used a tree as an example yesterday. If you happen to see a tree and it was literally perfectly symmetrical, it would look weird. You'd think there's something wrong with that tree. Is it plastic? You know, right? So, so it's the asymmetry and the diversity and the differences at the surface that create a context that allow the symmetry at the depths to understand its nature as complete and whole and satisfying. It makes it satisfying. Otherwise, it's not satisfying. If you have a song with just the tonic chord, it's not satisfying. It's just kind of boring. You need the transitions, you need the tension and then the release, and then the tension and then the release. So we provide that. And because we provide that, as I was mentioning before this webinar started, it was a very important point that I tried to example on my flute, but I'm not sure, it was so abstract, I'm not sure it really came through fully. So now that everyone's here, I just would like to say it in a sentence, and that is that these symmetrical forms at the finer levels of creation have multiple ways to resolve. And it's because of their symmetry that they have multiple ways to resolve. And so the qualities that we possess as humans provide different strokes of resolution for those incomplete forms, for those incompletions. So a single darkness can exist at a collective level of self, like say in a community or in a country or in an ethnic group or something like that. And it can find resolution. It can find all of its potential resolutions with all the different personalities and all the different types of people in that group. So you can say, just by being sweet, by having the qualities that are the antithesis of darkness, that are the opposite of darkness, we naturally spontaneously turn darkness to light. We naturally spontaneously complete darkness, darker forms of creation. But this energy healing session is about getting on top of that process and doing this in a way which is effortless, which is pain-free, which is blissful, which is so evolutionary. It's so evolutionary that all we experience from it is the evolution, the bliss of the evolution that comes, and rising, ourselves rising to ever and ever higher and higher levels of proficiency and wisdom and alignment with natural law. So one of the things that happened yesterday was this healing, where our healing collective, first as individuals and then as a collective, we found our way into the very, I'd say the eye of the storm, the deepest center of the evolutionary trajectory of nature. So the universe is evolving, constantly evolving. And when we place ourselves, we choose to identify ourselves into the center alignment, the aligned center of that evolutionary trajectory, then the difficulties or the discomforts that arise from getting too far away from nature's evolution, those don't touch us. It's like being in the middle of the river, and the river's flowing really fast in the middle, and then there's kind of like eddies along the side, and we brought ourselves into the center of the river. And by doing that, we were able to stabilize the witnessing value. That means all these eddies and all these bits and pieces around the edge, we're able, when you're in the center, you can you get the whole picture of the whole river, you get the whole view, right? And so we were able to stabilize that quality of stepping back, stepping outside the suffering, stepping outside the imbalance, outside the incompletions, and witnessing them and providing the witnessing value, not only for ourselves, but for the collective as well. And there was something interesting near the end of that where it went to the minerals or something. I kind of can't remember exactly, but I was reminded of it during our silence today, because yesterday's silence was very kind of a little bit rambunctious, almost very kind of bouncy and okay, we're going to do this. And then today it was, it still had a lot of that sort of enthusiastic, ready to go kind of energy. In fact, so much that I stopped our silence a minute early or half a minute early, but also it was much more specified. It was going right in, like very, very, very discriminating, very specific, which I think is good, because I really do feel that yesterday's session was quite abstract, and we need to get into some of the nitty gritty and get tools in your hands for dealing with stuff, and get tools in the hands of the collective for dealing with the stuff that we're dealing with collectively. All right, so that's the review of yesterday, best that I can. And today's silence, I was just saying that that was that element of, I found a lot of awareness in the sinuses and the head area, and this is all about where we process the physicality and the minerals of the world and the earth element. The earth element is up here, and our noses, okay. So I thought I'd start with some of the more, like practical on the surface, and then we'll work our way in, kind of priming the pump to get into the really abstract, deep stuff. So this one point came in from this lovely lady, and she said that she had heard that silk, which is a natural fiber, has the ability to block negative energies. Yeah, I've heard that for years, and a lot of people do sleep under silk sheets. And she puts in here an experience of how she actually noticed that having the silk protected her. So if you find that you have particularly uncomfortable experiences at night, you might consider getting silk sheets or silk sleep clothes, so that your body is protected through with that. So it does, evidently, it does that. It's also supposed to be good for your hair. And you can try it. Everything we can do. There's a lot of things. And I thought, Because her question came up, I thought I would just quickly list a lot of the things. Now, some of you, I see another question from someone who's been dealing with some very dark energies for a long time. And those of you who have been may have already kind of gone over some of this stuff. You've thought of this, but one of the things you can do is you can open doors and windows and just clear the air in your space. And the other thing is any kind of light, like physical light you bring, particularly you can light a candle or just turn on the lights. If it's at night, you know, and it's dark and you're feeling this heaviness, you just get the lights on, shake out the sheets. You know, if you don't have the silk, you can at least shake out the sheets, and sometimes burning incense. And there are probably different aromas. The people who are experts, I'm not an expert on aromatherapies or aromas, but I would imagine that there are aromas that are especially good for clearing negative, dense energies out of the environment. You can check that out. Our lady from Scotland probably has some tools for us there. All right. So that's just on a practical level and then she lists some other fabrics and some of their nice benefits. Very sweet. Linen is used for baking, and it's also supposed to be antifungal, antibacterial. Cotton is very luxurious. Wool regulates outside temperatures. It expands with heat and it contracts with cold. That's interesting. I didn't know that. And of course, whenever we're using or wearing natural fibers, we're not adding to the pollution in our world. So those are really beautiful points. Thank you for offering those. I really appreciate it. Yeah, so practical things. But the reason that we do practical actions like smudging or even saying mantras or different things like this, the reason we do them is to align our inner awareness with the path of the solution. So the reason that you smudge or the reason that you light the light or open the window is so that you're kind of like reminding yourself, oh, this is where I need to be. This is how I need to place myself in order to have the most positive, beneficial effect on this particular dark energy that I'm experiencing right now. But what really happens is on the level of consciousness. So it's not so different from taking medications or like a placebo. It's not so different. You do the action, but the action helps to self-position. Okay. I'm going to go to that question later. I would like to look at this question now. How can we find the courage to face and accept our own darkness as we resolve our issues so it will be reflected in the world? What a beautiful vision, right? She sees the connection between the individuality and the wholeness. Very beautiful. So how can we find the courage to accept our own darkness? It's a really big, beautiful question. And I think we've kind of addressed it from different angles before, but today we're addressing it from the angle of actual, like the darkness, like those structures, disembodied structures. We say disembodied, they're not really disembodied, but they have subtle bodies. They have only bodies made of frequency or energy. And sometimes we need to look at these. We need to look at, okay, what are we looking at in the terms of this darkness? So there's a range of not physical, and it ranges from the causal level where it's just frequency, it's just sound vibration, all the way up to, there goes my camera, thank you for realigning camera, all the way up to the etheric level where there's a body that's almost physical. It's physical enough, it's stable enough that it has shape, it has some shape and form to it, but it's not full physical. So this is the range that the darkness is allowed to express. And sometimes the darkness comes all the way to the surface, hence the question that I put for later, but I also addressed a little bit yesterday, human trafficking, right? Because sometimes things happen, like in our world, actual physical, material, yucky, dark, awful things. So, and I know that some of you who are dealing with challenges are seeing physical, material signs in your environment. So we can say that it goes all the way up to the physical material. But of course, to be efficient, we need to address it from the seed or the source. And to do that, we need to be able to witness it. That means not be gripped, because any gripping of awareness or getting or oneself lost in it will naturally make it very difficult to get to that level. You are always going for the level that's a shade deeper, a more profound, more expanded than whatever the darkness is that we're dealing with, right? So that's step number one. We need to get underneath it. Hence the healing from yesterday's session of witnessing. So if you missed yesterday's session, absolutely go back and check that one out again, because that was all about stabilizing awareness at that point of witnessing where, yes, the darkness is there, but yes, I can see it. And this is why, this is one of the reasons that in the human existence, we do have pain, because pain is so uncomfortable that it not only draws attention into the area that needs the love and needs the support, the completion, but it's also so uncomfortable that it elicits a witnessing response, right? Like you go in, it's, oh, something hurts, and you put the attention there, but the pain also causes you to like step back from it as well. So two things are happening. My awareness is going in to heal, but my awareness is expanding to a larger level of its own nature, so that I'm not gripped by the pain, but I can see it from a practical perspective. So flexibility, practice navigating the range of density from the subtle to the gross, from the subtle to the gross. And if there's something that really hurts at this level, it means we need extra practice at that level. Or if there's something that really hurts down at this level, we go down and we need more practice at that level. How can we find courage to face and accept our own darkness? The reason it takes courage to face and accept our own darkness is we have been conditioned for centuries to feel that our darkness is indicative of personal weakness or separation from being. And we actually did some healing for this yesterday too. And that was that healing. Remember that vicious cycle of when you hurt, that means you're separate from being, but being separate from being hurts. So that causes more hurt. But because you hurt, you're separate from being, but because you're separate from being, you hurt, right? So we did a big healing for that as well. Check that one out too, if you weren't with me yesterday. Okay, so it's a matter of releasing and letting go, of dissolving, not just personal belief, but beliefs that get set or get stuck in the system. They get set into the subtle fabric, the energy fabric of the physiology, that if there's anything unpleasant in there, it's proof that I am not divine. It's proof that I am bad or incomplete or not good enough or nasty or unacceptable or unlovable, right? Long list. You can fill in the blanks. You can fill in the blanks. But the truth is that we are so much bigger. We are so much bigger than whatever we feel. What we feel is one part, and then we are the feeler. We are the person who is experiencing, the experiencer. And the negativity, the darkness that we experience within ourselves has a reason. It has a reason. It is looking to complete itself. It is looking to return to source and return to wholeness. So the job is to obligingly allow that darkness to return to wholeness. And the return to wholeness does not require that. In fact, the return to wholeness only really effectively happens when we're in that witnessing state and we're untouched by the darkness. I can't say unmoved, because there is personal transformation that occurs, but the personal transformation is evolutionary. But I would say not identified with the darkness, not identified. I mean, you know, everything that we have is what we have. You know, I have hair, I have eyebrows, I have this jewelry. I say, oh, this is Dorothy's jewelry. But but am I the jewelry? No. Okay, so we get it. You get it. You get it. how do we accept the darkness? We realize that it is the stepping stone to our liberation, and that it doesn't define us as separate from creation. So most imbalances come back to that simple formula that the problem, the seed, almost always lies in a sense of separation from wholeness. So when we find that seed, then all of a sudden the darkness isn't really a problem anymore. And the other thing you must understand, and it took me becoming a mother of very disagreeable children to understand that if you're disagreeable, it does not make you unlovable. That's a hard one. It's a very hard one. And as I'm saying it, our collective is focusing in on this thing, and we're offering particularly to the ancestors, particularly to the female ancestors, which means it's particularly affecting our digestion, because moms are in charge of the mitochondria. They're in charge of giving you providing the mitochondrial DNA that resides in the body. So this is very important. It has to do with how we process experience, how we process it, because it can definitely be less painful if it's processed more smoothly. And if the mommies are feeling as if they are unlovable and not good enough and rotten and separated from divine and so forth, because they suffered or because they have challenges that they face, then this affects the way we metabolize our experience and also how we metabolize our food. But how we metabolize our food is a metaphor for how we metabolize experience. And so it addresses that. So I'm just feeling it. I'm just feeling it addressing that. The energy transformation is occurring there. It's like, you got it. Everybody got it. So we're dealing with this at basically a subcellular level, a molecular level of the physiology. Just like yesterday, our big, beautiful, powerful healing collective is so multifaceted. We're all different, you know, that the shift as it's taking place, as it's occurring for everyone in the mitochondria. So we process our experience differently and also heal the hearts of our mothers and grandmothers and great-grandmothers, etc. It's a lot of facets. It's a lot of different angles because each soul has a different angle on the process. And so it's not just a small healing for one little piece of the darkness. It's a big healing that touches and affects all the facets of the darkness. We become the force of nature. We're in the center, right? We're in the center of the vortex of universal evolutionary transformation. And from that position, the darkness cannot resist the evolution that it's getting from us any more than we can resist the evolution that the universe brings to us, right? You can't fight nature. If something's going to happen, it's just going to happen. So if it's really, if it's got the whole universe behind it, it's just going to happen. So this is how it is for this particular darkness. The one we actually started on it yesterday, but we're completing it today. We're going into a very, very deep, very intimate, very personal level of it. And we're healing it at a very personal level. Why? Because each of you deserves to experience every moment of this life in terms of its evolutionary value for you personally, and because you're experiencing it for you personally, also for the collective. Also part of this big collective transformation shift. Good job, everybody. That was awesome. Okay, thank you for that awesome question too, man. Okay, now I see a question's come in here, and a set of 3 questions here. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these one at a time and then do these on the in-between. So, because lots of good questions coming in, guys. Okay, good people. Beings take pleasure in relieving the suffering of others. So that means we define like nice people, good people, that it's a pleasure to help everyone feel better, right? Malevolent beings take pleasure in causing the suffering of others. What are the mechanics of this inversion? Oof. Yeah, such a solid, like a few words, but a lot of richness there, a lot of richness to unpack. So let's just look at that for a second. The pleasure the pleasure that we have to define that the malevolent beings get from causing suffering from others is actually illusory. It is the idea that their own suffering is somehow released a little bit or relieved when somebody else suffers. Oh, if that person over there is suffering, then my suffering doesn't feel quite as bad to me. Something like that. Or there's a kind of an illusion that the suffering of the malevolent being is when it transfers, if it can transfer over to another person, then that somehow makes it less for the malevolent being. But the problem is that whatever is the seed or source of that suffering in the malevolent being has to be addressed, because if it's not addressed, and like some of the pain siphons off the top, then that's actually not going to get, not only does it not get rid of any excess pain, it just makes room for more pain to come in. So it's completely an illusion. It's completely an illusion that the negative beings are actually somehow relieving their own suffering by causing suffering in others. But illusion is one of those big forms. It's one of those structures in our creation of which we cannot actually totally escape. Illusion, we've looked and looked at it, and it's knit into our reality, because the ability of divinity to create this whole manifest creation rides on laws of nature of illusion. It rides on it. Right? The reality is there's one big wholeness, unbounded, infinite being, which is experiencing itself as all these different forms. But at the surface, we experience all the different forms as the reality, as the whole reality. At least in the beginning, when consciousness isn't expanded fully, then it's just, this is what you get. What you see is what you get. What you see is what you get. Missouri is called the show me state. They don't believe anything they don't see. Now, of course, that's not everybody in Missouri. We lived in Missouri for a while. It was actually a very lovely spiritual place. But the saying is there, the state motto is there, probably created a couple hundred years ago. I think Missouri is at least 200 years old. And it's very possible that, like my grandfather on my mother's side was one of those people that if he couldn't see it, he couldn't experience it with his senses, it didn't exist. He was an atheist. Anyway, he's not an atheist anymore. It's okay. Everybody evolves, everything evolves. The point is that it appears separate at the surface, and the reality is it's one. That's the point. And that the appearance of separation is necessary for the one to feel complete and full and know its own beauty and understand itself utterly. So the surface divisions are necessary, but they're born of the breaking of the perfection, the perfect symmetry of wholeness. And when the wholeness breaks, we start to get incomplete forms. And this is what we're dealing with in today's session, are those incomplete forms. So it's a great question. What are the mechanics? Yeah. So those individuals who literally take pleasure in relieving the suffering of others also have to understand that the pleasure of relieving the suffering of others cannot extend to accepting their pain without eliminating the seed. Because if you become a person who is willing to be the object, so letting off the steam, right? Opening the steam valve, and the steam comes pouring out a little bit. But if you don't attend to the fire underneath, nothing ever heals. Nothing ever heals. And that pot will boil until it incinerates. So being a person who goes in, a nice person who goes in, is like, oh, I see that person has so much inner tension and they have so much anger and they have so much suffering. I can put myself in harm's way and Be the one who kind of acts as the pressure valve on that boiling pot. It doesn't, we have to understand that if our goal is to relieve suffering, and I think it is a laudable goal, and it is a beautiful goal. It must be done with such and I think this lady does this, but she's just asking the question to bring out the mechanics of it. Thank you. But that process has to be done in an intelligent manner. Otherwise, the efforts to relieve the suffering in others actually creates more pain. It's good to know. It's good to understand these mechanics. If the pressure isn't relieved by turning off the fire, then the pressure will relieve and what's inside will get even hotter. We have to be very careful how we position ourselves as the relievers of suffering in this world. Now, the illusory forms will be quick to tell you that their relief is born of you taking on their pain. That'll be the first thing. And the other thing that's very important, and I'm just seeing this, guys, in our collective, is not just in the individuals here, some of the individuals in this healing session, but also relatives and, contributors, people that you're close to and so forth. That is that there's a particular part of the prefrontal cortex that goes off like a little fire alarm. It goes off like a little warning signal when you're getting into an area that's dangerous. And these types of illusion will attack that. The illusion will attack that warning signal so that you're just like, so that one would be willing to put oneself in harm's way to create the illusion that we're eliminating suffering when we're not. Why? Why is it set up like that? That's like, well, that's a stupid way for nature to organize it. Right? I mean, I'm just having this thought right now. Isn't that kind of a stupid way? Like, okay, there's suffering and there's someone who's willing to help relieve the suffering. Why organize it like that? And why organize it so that there's that part of the prefrontal cortex that gets taken out, gets put to sleep or something so that the person is willing? Why? When I ask nature that question, the answer I get back is that it promotes diversity until the consciousness expands enough to get past that malfunction. I'm seeing it as I personally feel it's kind of a malfunction. That the particular, and here's something else I'm seeing is very interesting. Our healing collective, we're all coming at this from lots of different angles. Our healing collective is actually addressing alcoholism. Because alcohol does the same thing, right? Alcohol, drugs, tobacco, all these substances, they do the same thing. They go in the body and they stop blood flow and they stop neural connections into that part of the brain and says, hey, wait a minute, oh, this is bad for me. They just take that one out immediately first. And then you're sitting there just going, well, this is okay. It's okay, I don't mind. So it can happen though, even if you don't drink. But if there is a history of alcohol use in the family, that history of alcohol use can have an effect of putting a kind of I don't want to say permanent because nothing's permanent. We're undoing it now. But there's a kind of a genetic conditioning to weaken that part of the brain. There's a genetic conditioning. So that's healing. Wow. That's really awesome, you guys. You're so cool. Thank you. And I can feel the shifting of the energy flow in the brain and supporting the flow to get up into that prefrontal cortex big time. And not just reawaken the part of the brain that is your guide for discriminative relieving of the suffering of others, but also in the DNA, the imbalances in the DNA, there's also something in there, feels like it's related to a protein. Oh, of course, GABA, right? It's the protein goes in and it shuts down that area. Oh, so here it's in the DNA. When we went to the DNA, then I saw it. Oh, what's happening is the DNA is shifting so that it, I just put my camera off. Hang on. There we go. The DNA is shifting so that the way we produce GABA and the way we distribute it is taking place in a more efficient and discriminating way, so that we keep the flow of intelligence into the areas of our own mind, our resources, our capabilities that support our ability to leverage these new tools, the tools of energy healing, where we go to the seed. We go to the source of that thing, the source of that suffering, and turn off the fire that's under that flame. Turn off the flame that's under that pot. Thanks, guys. That was amazing. Thanks for that incredible question. She's got 2 more incredible questions, like, oh my God. But let me come to, because there's a bunch of questions coming in the box too. So, okay, so this person says that is referencing a story that I told at the end of yesterday's session about bumping into a negative or like a dark energy in an old house. And I did want to mention that as a practical point as well, that some objects in a house will naturally be like magnets for dark energies. Yeah. Oh, and alcohol obviously is one of them. They call it spirits, right? So one of the first things that happens when people email me and say, oh, I've got a problem with these types of challenging energies, I'm like, do you have alcohol in your house? Get it out. Because it definitely has this sort of energy frequency that acts like a anchor point. But other things can too. Like, we're very vigorously downsizing right now, and I'm finding old stuff, old things that were left in the family many generations, old photographs of people and stuff. And there's a lot of kind of nuanced energies in these objects. And so what I realized this morning is my job is to either purify the old energies out of those objects, and if I choose to keep them, there's heirlooms for the offspring or whatever, or get rid of them, maybe even burn them. And a lot of people do burn, and clothes can do that too. If you have clothing that you're wearing during time of terrible stress, it doesn't hurt to get rid of things in your house that hold on to dark energies and stress. Practical point. Okay. Oh, he's asking, how specifically did I work with that energy to help guide them to the other side? Is there a risk of martyring oneself to the darkness? Yes, there is. We just addressed that from someone else's question, isn't there? So very good. And we did a healing for it. Yeah, we're doing it. We're doing it. We're nudging through this mess. Do you ever just tell an entity to go away or ignore their presence? I have done that, but I found it wasn't that effective. That for some reason, when I told the entity just to go away or ignore its presence, I found that didn't really result in the level of satisfaction from the experience as actually working with it and resolving it as an expression of my own nature. Is there more darkness out there than one man can handle? It seems. Oh, there's more darkness out there than one man can handle. It seems. Indeed. Why we are doing this webinar and why we are working on it as a collective. It's not that it's really more than any one person can deal with. It's that the darkness sits at such a fine level of creation that it has usually these forms down at the causal level have fairly symmetrical structures, so they're really stable. And also, as I said, they're multifaceted, and their resolution is their complete resolution, their complete healing is a result of many resolutions combined together. And so one single resolution that can be provided or created by one single person sometimes might not feel like enough. Now, I need to qualify that, because when I say enough, I mean the individual with awareness stationed at the individual side of ego, right? So the individual ego, individual self, my individuality as seen as my awareness witnesses or comes through these senses of perception in this body, in this life, right at this moment. But because ego is really a spectrum from individuality to universality, and with our consciousness, with energy healing, one of the skills that we develop with energy healing that you're developing right now is to be flexibly position, self-position awareness anywhere along that spectrum from universal to individual. Then it's possible to bring awareness out to more the universal level, which is what I meant earlier when I said we kind of want to get underneath it. We want to get to a subtler level than that darkness. However manifest or however dense or however difficult the darkness is, in the field of pure being, it is pure light. And so there is going to be a point that's deeper than that darkness. And of course, the darkness, these dark energies, they really leverage illusions. So they're kind of wanting to deal in the areas of mind and emotions and thinking and impressions and even feelings like physical impressions, the etheric body. See, I'm seeing that a lot of the connections for the person who asked this questions are in the etheric body. Anyway, so we want to get deeper than that. We want our awareness to expand. So from individual perspective, it expands to more universal perspective. It also becomes more abstract. And at the more abstract level, there's more like I'm witnessing the pain is up there in the etheric body, but I'm here at this subtler level witnessing it. And pain will naturally do that. If it's bad enough, it'll push you to a more universal point of perspective. So, and then finally, how did I exactly work with it? I treat it very much like I would treat anybody that I'm helping. And that is go to the seed of the imbalance and address the seed. And what that does when I take because as those of you who were with me yesterday recall, one of the aspects of this experience that I had when I was in my 20s was that there was a kind of a reflective element there, that being was coughing up its energies, and then my physiology, I was reflecting it in my physiology. And from that perspective, I was able to find the seed of the imbalance. And because I could witness the seed, it reflected back to that being, and then it could witness the seed. And so really each person heals themselves. It's not like I magically healed them, or during the time I was with, as a young mother, I was not magically healing all the beings that were coming for support. They were healing themselves, and I was just providing the perspective, the witness. I was being the witness, just like I am now. Like all the healings that we're doing in this session, we are doing them and they're glorious. And I can sit back here and witness and say they are glorious because we are doing them as a collective. It's not like, oh, Dorothy gets all the credit or something. By no means. You guys are glorious. And we're doing this and it's powerful. So thank you for being with me. And thank you for that awesome question. Okay, this is very important. And this is coming from a physicist. And I was thinking about this discrepancy in the language I'm using. I'm constantly facing the challenge that we're looking at very, very abstract, very profound levels of creation. And the language fails us a lot of times. So of course we draw on Vedic science. We sometimes draw on our scientific language. And yesterday I was giving musical examples, way beyond language, the musical examples, but then unfortunately also kind of way beyond anybody who's not a musician. So anyway, so yeah, he says here, this is a physicist speaking, symmetry sounds perfect. It's puzzling that it needs to be resolved. Oh, my flute's on the other side. Will you bring me my flute? Sorry, guys. I wasn't going to give you any musical examples today, but it's right there. It's right there. I wasn't going to give you any, can you bring the stand too? Because I'll need to put it back on its stand. I wasn't going to give you any musical examples today, but I'm not going to do this in a way, it's really cold. I'm not going to do this in a way that requires any knowledge of music theory on your part, okay? But I do want you to see, that even symmetrical forms are incomplete, right? Because the complete form totality is, I'm not a singer, but you get the idea, right? It's all sound, it's all the pitches, it's all the points. But what we get at the subtle level creation are symmetrical forms, but they don't hit all the points, right? That's a symmetrical form. The distance between each note is the same distance, but there's a gap. There's a gap between each note. And the reason I had him bring my flute was, what I realized is that particular symmetrical form. There are dozens of symmetrical musical forms, by the way, and they absolutely reflect the types of forms that we meet in the subtle levels of creation, and they can be resolved many ways. Oh, it's a luscious thing. I'm actually on the verge of working up some kind of presentation on that, or something that interfaces with the field of Jyotish, because evidently, for those of you who don't know what Jyotish is, that is Vedic astrology, and Vedic astrology also works with these same principles. Oh, so there's a lot of yummy stuff there to explore. But what I was going to say, and why I brought the flute, was that there are other symmetrical forms that are even emptier. And you'll notice, and I'm doing this for those who missed me yesterday, you'll notice that they have a sound to them that doesn't really feel like being at home. It doesn't feel like coming home, right? That's another symmetrical form, but it's like a little more separate than the other one. So it sounds even more incomplete. And there are others and others and others. But it's not infinite. It's not an infinite set, right? But we have infinity. We have infinity in our hands. So with our access to infinity, we can deal with a set number of incomplete yet symmetrical forms. It's just that they're at a very fine level of creation. So they have a kind of symmetry. The symmetry makes them stable, but at the same time, they're not complete. And I won't go into the music theory behind how to resolve them, because I think I need a larger format for that. And I have to teach you things about music theory when this isn't a music class. So we won't go into that now, but we're doing it. You should know we are actually doing this, that sometimes you have an incomplete form, and in order to resolve it, you have to go through 2 steps of completion or 3 steps of completion before you come back to the tonic or back to the home base. And that's when you get chord progressions, and chord progressions make music beautiful. They're the foundation of what's beautiful in music. The tension, the incomplete form, and then the release. All right. You probably think I'm a terrible flute player because my tone was so bad, but you have to warm up on a flute. That flute was icy cold, so it didn't sound that great, but that's okay. If I play you a song, I'll warm up first. I promise. How would one resolve fear on a personal level, since the seeds might be different? Racism, national differences. Our bones are made of minerals, crystalline structures. Thank you. Oof, well, that's a good question. All right. How would one resolve fear on a personal level, since the seeds might not be fear? That's how I'm interpreting your question. The seed might not be a seed of fear. It might be racism or national differences or whatever. The seed of the malevolence or the incompletion will always have some resolution, some illusion associated with it. There's always some illusion. So we need to get down to the seed of the illusion. And usually, in most cases, you can always at least double check. The illusion is, I'm separate from totality. I'm separate from being. I'm separate from wholeness. And you can imagine, just imagine for a second, if a being were comprised of a series of frequencies, and the frequencies weren't, it wasn't all frequencies, but there were gaps, there were missing parts. It would, of course, think it's incomplete. It would feel incomplete. And it sounds incomplete when I play it on my flute. It sounds like messy. So there's an identification. It's egoic. It's in the ego. The ego says, I'm incomplete. I'm not wholeness. And the truth is that the spectrum of ego, from individual ego to universal ego, isn't actually totality, because there's still the identification. There's some value of identification there. But even when it's universal ego, even when it's Brahmi Chaitana, it's the wholeness, is identifying itself as wholeness, there's a level of totality that's para Brahman, that's bigger than the spectrum or the dynamics. We could say the dynamics of ego, because ego is like an aspect. It's one of the 8 prakritis, right? It's one of the 8 forms of nature that nature takes. So then there's the wholeness, that level that's, we looked at, I think 2 webinars ago, both created and uncreated, existent and non-existent, beyond the beyond, beyond all that is, beyond everything, beyond even beyondness. That level, that's the ultimate witness of the ego. And that's the resolution and the home for where all these incompletions are moving. So that would be I guess that would be my best way to describe the resolution, is that as individuals, we are facing these things. We face these because we are being asked by nature. We are being forced to get to that level of completion within ourselves. Once that level of completion, once we're holding on to that, then it's pretty easy to just create the space, create the condition whereby whatever puts its attention on us, it gets that. The attention comes, it gets wholeness. The attention comes, it gets wholeness, like that. This is, okay, so he's saying the darkness is part of being. It's more part of the expressed side of creation. The absolute is absolutely light. It's absolutely whole. But just at the very, very first beginnings of expression, we start to get, you see the difference between boo and da 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 da, right? Just like it's a little difference, but it's enough of a difference because of the manifested structure. But his point is well taken, that the darkness is here for the sake of evolution, absolutely. But when we consider the ego of darkness, oh yes, we're considering that, what does it want? Well, it wants to shine in its own inexpressible light, because the light shines differently at the surface than it does deep inside. The laws of nature are different from the surface to the inside. So it wants to go home. It wants to shine in the light of totality. But when we consider the ego, well, yeah, not necessarily what it thinks it wants, i.e., I want your life force, or I want you dead, but what does it perceive that death will give it? Oh yeah, we did cover that. And can our powerful collective facilitate healing? And we did. Thank you. Thank you for your beautiful question that came in a little while ago. And you and I, we think on very similar terms. So probably about the time you were asking that question, I was probably answering it. Right. Okay. This lady says, my daddy was born as a farm boy in Missouri, and show me is in my blood. So yeah, woo. I have a tendency to try to leap over dark energies and wonder how to pace my actions so I can get to the seed. I wonder how to find the balance of not going too fast. That's a really, really beautiful question. God, thank you. right, to try to outpace, or, well, that certainly is valid. That this is a valid way of addressing problems. That if when your intuition is so good that you kind of see the problems coming a mile away, it is completely valid. It is completely fair to hide. You see it coming, you see it coming, you see it coming, you dip down. It's like a wave, right? Has anybody ever body surfed, right? You see it coming, you see, like, I'm not picking up this wave. So you dip down under the water and the wave goes whoop like that over you, right? And so that's absolutely fair, because the reality is that at every point in creation, you are evolving, which means your capabilities for dealing with darkness are going to be more efficient, more profound, more like right in there, just do it, right? So if you see the darkness coming and you're like, this is just going to be so nasty, then what you can do is you slide into the field of absolute light, absolute being. And from that level, you would it will pass over. It passes over you. Pass over. Passes over. Passes over. Doesn't mean that at some point you have to deal with that particular karma or that particular darkness, but the next time it comes, you will be bigger. You will be stronger. You will have better ability to see it and immediately identify, oh, there's the seed of it. And like today we covered some of that, right? We covered some of the typical seeds are these forms of illusion that I'm separate from divinity. It comes from that show me quality, right? That even beings who reside in the subtle field of creation, if there are gaps in their frequency patterns, then they don't feel complete right there. They don't feel like they have it. You can imagine, I could almost draw something, but you can imagine if it's like my fingers, okay, it's like my fingers. If the vibrations, it has a frequency here and a frequency here and a frequency here and a frequency here and a frequency here, and there are gaps in between, then it's attracted to someone whose frequencies match up like that, right? Like if you're a sweet person who doesn't want to do anybody harm, right? So you can fill in those gaps, and then that being feels more complete. But the gaps are seated in the need of eternal, unbounded, absolute being to understand its own nature through the transformative process, through the manifesting process. And that's what gives rise to the illusion that they're separations. And so even those beings, they want to go home. They want to get into this place where they're like, oh, I'm really just being. And I have this color hair, and I have that color eyes, and I have this tall and that whatever, right? This shape and that. They're subtle. For those beings, they're subtle shapes, but they still are there's some definition there. And so they also need to anchor. And so when you are anchor, you're just anchorness incarnate. Then whatever puts its attention on you, it gets back the anchor to being. I know that sounds simple. It's kind of simplistic, but it's incredibly evolutionary for you. So for us, it's incredibly evolutionary to just be a constant anchor to the source of creation, to divinity, to our own divinity. And to practice acceptance of all of our uniqueness. Personal FYI over here, check out Nestor Kornblum presentation on replay of Global Sound Conference through Sunday regarding harmonious voice and symmetry overtone vocal. Yes, I would imagine he's got some good stuff there. And then I promised a few questions. We're a little bit over, but I promised a few quick questions from yesterday. So I think we've covered most of these. One is how do we work, but this one is very more specific. Like I think I'm taking this one from the level of an energy healer. How can we turn darkness into light for other people? You can't do other people's healing for them, obviously, but you can act like a tuning fork to show them what that quality is. And my experience is it's often very intimately connected to self-love, but getting past that illusion of I'm separate from source, there's a complex, like a paradox associated with self-love when a person feels separate from the source of creation, right? Because if I believe myself to be separate from being, then if I love myself, then I'm loving my little individual self, and that becomes vanity and narcissism, and it's putting myself ahead of others, which is not always a nice thing to do, and so forth. But the other option is I don't love myself, and neither of those options are any good. So so it's a matter of anchoring that self-love structure in the heart. This is starting from this area, it anchors in to being. So I love myself as being. I love because divinity is all there is, and divinity that I love in myself, I see in everybody, like that. Then it becomes, that's a, usually that, like, because I'm going quickly here, right? But in a nutshell, that usually tends to take care of most problems in that area. Then they can fill in the gaps themselves. They have to fill in the gaps. They have to fill in the gaps. Okay. Scapegoating. Can we do healing for scapegoating? Scapegoating again comes from that self-positioning. And so the thing that's difficult for the scapegoat, and I know this because I also went through, it was like one of my issues that I had to work with, not only this lifetime, but also previous incarnations. So it was like a really deep set thing. And I kept finding, like, somehow spontaneously, I kept getting scapegoated, and I'm like, why is that? And then I realized that in that condition of feeling very, very uncomfortable and terrible pain that comes from that condition of feeling scapegoated, one has to use the pain as a leverage to step back and witness the whole experience. The pain has to be, you have to work within the context of pain. And that's not very easy to do. And that's why scapegoating is such a difficult challenge to overcome, because at the time that you have to do your power moves, you are also suffering. There's some suffering involved. It's very difficult. But get this, it's like an advanced lesson too, because if you can find your way back to your witnessing center in the source of creation, even when you are experiencing so much pain and the pain cries and it calls your awareness out to the surface, then that anchor, you know, that anchor is so solid. It is so solid. It's like the final flop of the wave to anchor your own ability to witness your experience. And then from the witnessing position, you're like, oh, I need to reposition so I'm not martyring myself for this person. Oh, I need to set up a healthy boundary. And I quit having the experience of martyring when I gave myself permission to set healthy boundaries. So that's good. That's what is the difference between a person who does something evil or hurtful to others and an incompletion? The incompletion is the subtle foundation behind the hurtful behavior. So that person feels incomplete. People don't hurt other people unless they're already suffering and feeling incomplete. And that's why a lot of times if we are having to go back, in my case, the scapegoating, for example, when I went back into past incarnations to heal that problem, I had to heal the other people involved as well, because they were also struggling through their mess as well. And help, I had to provide the completion to them as expressions of myself. Reverse engineering, thank you, less hard. Okay, that's it. We did all the questions. Whew. And I only went 7 minutes over time. Not too bad. You guys got a bonus. Get a 7-minute bonus there. Thank you all for being with me for the amazing questions that came in today. Literally, today's entire session was born or built out of the answers to your questions. And we did some incredible, powerful, amazing group healings. Our next session is on systems. So as I mentioned yesterday, that'll be like into personal systems like nervous system, circulatory system, lymphatic system, digestive system, etc., but also collective systems such as our educational system and our political system, our economic system, and so forth. So we've got a lot of really rare and wonderful material to dive into that next time around. Thank you for your raised hands and comments. You guys are so absolutely adorable and precious. And I have so much respect for all of you, for all of us, that we're taking this time. And some of you have been with me for years, doing this again and again, and working with the potential of our consciousness as individuals and as a collective to make a real difference in this world and to heal those deep, deep problems that face our world. So thank you, everyone, for being with me. And I'm looking forward to enjoying as we slide into the end of 2020. I'm looking forward to enjoying being in your beautiful company and the gift of every one of you. Thank you. Bye. Thanks for being with me.